Can you dig it? With a Bobcat compact excavator, you can. Up to $6,000 in rebates on select models and 0% financing for 36 months.
Check us out at Bobcat of Charleston in North Charleston.
This episode of the Duke Basketball Report podcast is brought to you by the fine gentlemen of Bird Campbell, PA. Bird Campbell means business. Hello, Duke fans, and welcome to episode 116 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. It is late Wednesday night, March 28th, 2018. We are recording this evening after the conclusion of the annual Duke recruiting show. The McDonald's All-American game, the biggest event in the high school basketball showcase. And we thought we weren't going to be recording again for at least a few more days, but there's been a whole slew of developments in the Duke basketball world. So we're back. And before we get into all that, let's introduce ourselves as usual. I am your host for this episode, Sam Klein, coming to you from Denver. I am joined as usual by Donald Wine in Washington, D.C. Good evening, Donald. I know you watched the game. How you doing?
I'm doing good. It was a good game to watch. I got a lot of notes, and I think we should just get right into it once we bring in the other guy that's on the podcast.
All right, and that other guy is Jason Evans in Atlanta. Jason, good evening, sir. You were at the McDonald's All-American practices this week doing some behind-the-scenes stuff for us, so hopefully we'll get into a little bit of that, yes?
Yeah, that's the plan, and well, I'm just gonna say it. I'm a little drunk. I'm kind of drunk.
Y'all, if you weren't ready for this, we're about to do an episode of the show with a whole bunch of topics, and Jason Evans might not be totally with us, but we're gonna do our best because we got stuff to talk about, right?
We did.
Yes. Yeah. So the people know, and you can already tell. It's like I'm not able to form my sentences as well as I usually do. So my congregation, the temple that I belong to, does what we call a men's Seder. Passover is coming up this weekend, and so always a couple days before Passover, we do this event where a bunch of the men in the congregation get together, and we pretend. Don't tell our wives. We pretend like it's this religious thing, but what we really do is drink a lot of scotch. And we have steaks. So I had a delicious filet for dinner tonight and a lot of scotch.
Now, Jason,
right, so
you showed us a bunch of pictures of what you were drinking, but you didn't show us the steak.
No,
I didn't see the steak.
I didn't take a picture of the steak. Sorry.
We will do our best to include whatever photos Jason sent us in the thread for the show. So check out the thread on the DBR.
Oh my God.
When you once you've listened to this episode, or while you're listening, maybe enjoy it with a nice glass of Lagavulin or whatever you fancy. Anyway, we'll start off with the first item, guys. The biggest news of the week, the most shocking news. Marvin Bagley has declared for the NBA draft. Jason, your reaction.
Yeah, stunning. I think I said to you guys on the podcast, a friend of mine sent me a message when this happened. They said, in other news, grass is green and water is wet.
And Donald, your reaction. Marvin Bagley go into the draft.
Yep, that was going to happen.
Okay, we're done with that. Moving on. The real biggest breaking news.
Actually, wait. We should also mention Wendell Carter hasn't officially declared, but his mom declared for him.
Yeah, and we're actually going to get into that. So we'll talk about the article that quoted Wendell Carter's mom extensively. I do want to start though with the most breaking news. We do want to get to the McDonald's All-American game, but I want to start with the news out of Durham and simultaneously out of Pittsburgh. There's been a fair amount of staff turnover as it relates to the Duke program. So Jeff Capel, who for a few years now has been the associate head coach at Duke, is the new head coach of the Pittsburgh Panthers men's basketball team. Of course, they play in the ACC. He becomes the first Mike Krzyzewski assistant to leave for an in-conference rival. Obviously, Duke plays every year against Notre Dame and Mike Bray, and against good friend of Mike Krzyzewski's, Jim Boeheim. Neither of those guys were in those jobs when their teams, or they were both in those jobs when their teams joined the ACC. So Capel's the first one to leave for an in-conference team. And at the same time, John Shire and Nate James, who have both been assistants for a few years now, have been elevated to the role of associate head coach, Capel's old role. So it's similar sort of to how Steve Wojciechowski and Chris Collins both took over the associate head coach's role in 2008 after Johnny Dawkins left for Stanford. So there's a lot to get to about this, but we speculate a lot around here and all over sort of the college basketball internet about Coach K's retirement plan and who might succeed him. And for a few years now, especially since Duke's been on this great run of recruiting, Jeff Capel has been high on that list of potential successors, at least among those who sort of follow this thing, due mostly to his being attributed with a lot of the credit for Duke's resurgence in the recruiting world. And also, I think because the last presumed heir to the throne, Johnny Dawkins, hasn't fared so well in his head coaching time. He was let go at Stanford. Now he's at UCF. So I want to start with Donald. I'll ask you, what do you think about this move for Jeff Capel and what it means for Duke and what it means for Pittsburgh?
Well, honestly, I was shocked to hear that he was the guy. You know, a couple of days ago, there were rumors that were pointed at John Shire being the guy that Pitt was targeting, and there were conflicting reports about the veracity of those rumors. Turns out that Pitt was in Durham, but they were talking to a different guy. It was Jeff Capel. Now, I think it's a big loss for Duke, but let's start out with this. It is a huge hire for Pitt. They get a coach that has experience in a mid-major program at VCU. He coached at Oklahoma in a power conference in the Big 12. I think he's going to do a great job putting that program back together up there. And I think I don't know if you saw this during the McDonald's All-American game, but it was announced that Chris Carrawell will be returning to the Duke staff to replace Jeff Capel. He won't be an associate head coach, but he'll be under the aforementioned John Shire and Nate James. So I think we have our staff put back together, at least for the time being. You know, I think the thing about it, you know, Jeff Capel in our eyes, and obviously we're not in deep with the program, but we follow it very closely. He had become the guy that Coach K had relied on the most while he was here. He was the associate head coach. Whenever Coach K had health issues and couldn't coach, Jeff Capel was the guy. It was clear that he was doing a lot. Was often.
It was often that Coach K. I mean, like in each. It's
been once a year at least. You know, one game or a stint of games like when he had that surgery last season. But he has been the guy. You know, there was never a question about who was going to take over if coach was sick and could not coach. And when it comes to recruiting front, a lot of people thought that he was one of the main people at the forefront of this recruiting surge that we've had over the last couple of years. But one thing that I will note, and this is not a slight on Jeff Capel, because I think, you know, this staff will obviously miss him dearly. He's going to be back in Cameron, or at least facing Duke every year as the Pitt coach. This machine continues. You know, a lot of people thought years ago when Chris Collins left for Northwestern, then Wojo went to Marquette, that our recruiting can keep up, but it's only gotten better. And it sounds like, judging by Jason's great work with the interviews that he had with the guys at the McDonald's All-American game, we'll get to that in a second, that John Shire has recently helped out with some of the big-time recruits. So maybe this just means that he can pick up the slack. Nate James has been around for quite a while. He can pick up some of the slack. And Nolan, if he is elevated to an assistant coach, he would be able to recruit. So,
No. My bet is, just really quick, I think the fact that they've hired Carrawell tells you what's happening with Nolan Smith, that Nolan Smith is going to follow Jeff Capel to Pittsburgh. I think Nolan Smith is going to get a prominent position on the Pittsburgh staff.
That's not confirmed yet or anything.
That's not confirmed yet. Yeah, it's not announced yet.
Let's be clear.
Why would but guys, let's think about it. There's no reason for them to hire Carrawell. Carrawell was an assistant coach at Marquette with Wojo. There's no reason for him to leave an assistant coaching job at Marquette unless he's becoming an assistant coach at Duke. And the NCAA doesn't allow you to have an unlimited number of assistant coaches. There's 3 spots there, and we now know those 3 guys. Nolan Smith didn't leave an assistant coaching job at Duke I mean, he wasn't an official assistant. He was like right behind that,
Right.
sort of an advanced manager kind of, or not quite assistant position that Duke has, created. There's no way Nolan Smith left that position to do nothing. He is clearly, I think, it hasn't been announced, but I'll be shocked if he doesn't follow Jeff Capel to Pittsburgh.
And I think that would be a good move for Nolan as well, to get, basically that's a promotion for him to get that experience. But in short,
but by the way, Donald, your point, I think Carrawell will be a great recruiting assistant, the same way you were mentioning that Nolan Smith could be. I think they can play that same role very, very nicely.
Yeah, and he did that a little bit when he was here before he left for Marquette. But in short, I think while Jeff Capel leaves a big hole, we have guys to fill that hole, and I think this show will go on. And I think the interesting part of this move, the most interesting part, is that for years when assistants left Duke to take on a head coaching role, it was far away from the ACC. This is the first time, as Sam noted, that we have a coach leaving for an in-conference school, and that would have that storyline and that plot line every single time they play. So this show will go on. I think that plot line will be interesting, and obviously for Capel, I think is a great move for him personally, and I wish him the very best, except for obviously the 1, 2, or 3 times a year that we play him.
Hey, let me jump in. I think the most interesting thing here is not what it says about Jeff Capel. It's what it says about Mike Krzyzewski. Because because I there's no way to know for certain, but the presumption among just about everyone, including people who are close to the program and close to the assistant coaches, was that Capel was the coach in waiting. Not that Capel had been promised the job, but it really looked like, and no one can be promised the job, but it really looked like Capel was going to be the next head coach at Duke when Mike Krzyzewski, who is 71 years old, the presumption was when Coach K stepped down that Capel was going to immediately step into that job. And the fact that Capel left says to me there are only 2 possibilities. Actually, I'll revise it. There are 3 possible reasons why he could leave. Reason number 1, Coach K says to him, you know what? You need to go someplace else to get more experience, to prove yourself as a head coach before we give you the job. Before we can't just hand you the job.
Which I think would be a weird excuse, because he has been a head coach before at the high major level.
Exactly. He was at Oklahoma. Exactly. I completely agree with you. That's why I originally said 2, and then I revised it to 3. That one that I just said first was my third reason. I don't think that's much of a reason. So the second of the possible reasons there is that Coach K said to him, you know what? I think I'm going to be here for a while. I'm not planning on leaving anytime soon. And if you got an opportunity to go sculpt your own program and do your own thing, go ahead and do that, because I'm going to be here for at least 4 or 5 more years.
This kind of analogy, it's like a boxer. Sometimes boxers only fight once, twice a year, if that. And you always talk about sparring sessions, and that's what kind of being an assistant coach and having spot duty as an interim head coach does. But sometimes a coach needs to get back out there and as they say, keep his guns quick. So when he's doing this, and that's the thing. When Pitt comes around and they're probably, the rumors of they're talking to John Shire, Capel was probably like, hey, if there's an opportunity to be a part of a big time program at a big time conference, it's not coming anytime soon, bigger than being in the ACC and competing at Pitt. So I think that's kind of probably played a little bit into that too.
Yeah. And let me really quickly get to my, reason number 3 that I could imagine for Jeff Capel leaving. Reason number 3 would be Capel knew he was being courted by Pitt, maybe by other jobs as well, as he has been in the past. He was rumored, to be connected to the Georgia Tech job. He was supposedly going to be connected perhaps to the Arizona State job before Bobby Hurley took that one. And I wonder if Capel went to Coach K and said, hey, am I going to be, the next guy? Is this, sort of a sure thing that I'm your successor? And Coach K said, no, not really. Don't know. We have no idea yet. And Capel, because he didn't get that kind of assurance, didn't get the kind of word that, yeah, it's going to be yours, that's why he decided to leave.
I'm surprised, though, given the amount of attention that Capel has gotten the last couple of years as a head coach for just about any high major program, that he would want to take a job in the ACC, and one that's going to be so hard as the one at Pittsburgh will be, with the massive rebuild that they have ahead of them. I'm not saying that he's not qualified for it. Not that I don't think he'll do a good job, because I do think he'll be successful there. Just that if I was him, I'm in a great situation, in the same way that, Steve Wojciechowski and Chris Collins, it seemed like, waited around for their best opportunities. And I think they both took really good opportunities in major conferences away from the ACC. So in that sense, I'm a little surprised. I'm also a little surprised from the perspective that, oh my God, where did my thought just go?
Well, hey Sam, let me ask you a question.
Who's drunk?
And we think
drunk
Jason
now,
is the drunk one.
Who's drunk
Sorry.
now?
Well, let me ask you a question real quick.
I had one beer before we started.
I'm the sober one. How did this happen? Hold on. I need to get a drink before I do this. But anyway, no, my question is, coaching is a carousel, as we all know. And I think here's the question. Dan Hurley was rumored to be the front runner and the first choice for Pitt. And he ended up going to UConn. If Dan Hurley goes to Pitt and UConn comes after Jeff Capel, do you think Jeff Capel leaves? Because I don't think he does.
No way.
Pittsburgh is a much better job than UConn at this point.
I
surprised. I'm surprised that Dan Hurley made that choice. The only thing that I guess stands out to me is that UConn is a little bit closer to his home base. He is a New Jersey guy. He's a Northeast guy. Pittsburgh isn't that far from those places, but in terms of culture is wildly different than being
it sounded like
New
his
Jersey.
family preferred Connecticut over Pittsburgh.
It's still, Connecticut's still in the sort of greater New York tri-state area. Pittsburgh is not. Pittsburgh is all the way on the other side of Pennsylvania and is in Appalachia, where UConn is certainly not.
And it's worth noting that no one knows better than Jeff Capel how quickly you can turn around a difficult situation, because Capel, has been as we've mentioned, has been at the helm of Duke's recruiting the past few years, and it has been put together a new team every single season because of Duke being one and done. So he knows how quickly you can remake a team and remake it pretty good. Danny Hurley. Danny Hurley, it's a slow build. That's what Danny Hurley has done for the most part at Rhode Island, and in other head coaching jobs. So, for someone to have the vision to look at Pitt, that was a program that looked like it was in huge, huge trouble and had a terrible, terrible season, and say, oh no, I can happen there quickly. I can see Capel having that vision more than Hurley. Not that there's anything wrong with, however you want to construct your team, but I think that could maybe explain a little bit of as well.
And now I remembered. I wanted to go back to the situation at Duke, where Capel's role, like I said, is being filled by Nate James and John Shire. We haven't heard much, I think, in Nate James's time on the bench about exactly, what his strengths are as an assistant coach. I assume, based on his time at Duke as a player, that he's coaching the guys on I guess, like, how to be tough and how to be part of the program and engaged, even if they're not the stars of the team. But we don't really hear much about it. I assume it's much more of a behind the scenes thing. We don't even really see him much in the Duke Blue Planet coverage. John Shire we hear a lot about as the recruiting guru. Like Donald said, he apparently is a wizard at talking to high school kids and convincing them to come to Duke. Yeah.
I was going to say, when Coach K doesn't do the halftime interviews, for the most part, it seems like Shire is the guy who does the halftime interviews. Shire's the guy who has the rival podcast. He has the podcast that he does during the summer. Let me ask you, Sam, I know you're the host, but let me put the question to you. Are you surprised that they were elevated equally? Because if you'd said to me, someone's going to become the associate head coach, I would have said Shire. I would not have said Shire and James.
My thought, and this is what I was getting to, is that
I set you up
neither of them is sort of fully set up for the assistant executive role that Capel was in. Because let's face it, Jeff Capel as an assistant, from our perspective, from the outside looking at the program, Jeff Capel was doing a lot more as a head coach than most, prime assistant head coaches are probably doing around the country, right? He's had to be the head coach of the team for at least one game, I think, each of the last 3 years. He handles a lot of that duty. Shire does the halftime interviews. Capel does some of them as well. Capel is a pretty visible face of the program, more so, I think, than you see at other programs. I'm not sure that John Shire, being a little on the younger side, he's only 31, or Nate James, who is just not that public of a guy. We don't see him that often. I don't think either of them is fully ready to step into the mostly executive role of being Coach K's right-hand man. And so they both sort of need to do it in the absence of either of them having enough experience at it. If this were a few years from now, if John Shire was a little older, then it would surprise me. Then I would think that Shire was sort of ready for it. Or if Nate James was more out there and we knew more about him and we heard from him more. Either way, it would make more sense. So that was kind of the surprising thing for me, is that neither of them struck me as ready to take over that job, because Coach K, I think, in recent years has probably ceded some of the leadership of the program to his assistants, more so, again, than most head coaches do, because they are not all-time greats who also have USA basketball on the side and also have all the other things that Coach K does. So in that sense, I'm a little surprised that he couldn't find another guy to bring in who was more experienced. At the same time, it tells me that he has a lot of confidence in them together, in the way that he had in Chris Collins and Steve Wojciechowski 10 years ago, to put them both in that role. And Wojciechowski, I was looking this up earlier, Wojo was the same age then when he got promoted to associate head coach as Shire is now. So it's not like Shire is so young for that job. And like Donald mentioned up at the top, Shire was being rumored for the Pitt job until it seemed like they hired Capel yesterday. So there is some confidence in Shire. We have a number of other things to cover. So I think we've gone through the coaching stuff. Is there anything else you guys wanted to add on this topic, or can we get on to the McDonald's All-American game?
Let's talk about some athletes.
I love it. Okay. So I'm going to start with Jason because he saw the recruits first. So on Tuesday, was it, Jason, or Monday?
It was Tuesday.
At the McD's practice. So Tuesday, Jason was at McDonald's All-American practice with a press pass courtesy of SB Nation and Duke Basketball Report, which is extremely cool. I know that DBR is posting some of the videos that you took, but you got a chance to see all of our recruits. So that's Trey Jones, the point guard, who's the younger brother of Tyus Jones. And then we have three big wings in Cam Reddish and Gatorade Player of the Year, RJ Barrett, and high-flying Zion Williamson, who won the dunk contest, as well as big man EJ Montgomery, who is not committed to Duke, but is still on Duke's recruiting radar, and Duke is still after him pretty hard. They're all five-star guys. They're all expected to make big impacts next year in college basketball. So, Jason, I want to ask you first, what did you see from your time at the practices this week from any of the guys? And feel free to start wherever you want.
So the place where I start, and I wrote about this in the article that got posted on the main page of the DBR, you have to start with the four of them as a collective. And I can't convey enough. I tried to put it in the stuff I wrote. I can't convey enough to people how close these four guys are. And it's unusual because I'm in that gym. It's a huge gym. It's the Atlanta Hawks practice gym. There are two full courts that are there. The whole thing is surrounded by NBA scouts. They were just literally, it was 100+ people surrounding these two courts. And the immediate takeaway that I had from watching our guys was that anytime they could, they were together. And it wasn't just like they were together because they all knew they were Duke guys and they're supposed to stand together. Like, they were talking, they were laughing, they were shooting with each other. They would play a little bit of one-on-one with each other. When their teams were doing drills, if it was a one-on-one drill, they drilled against each other. If it was a 2-on-2 drill, they were in the 2. If it was a 3-on-3 drill, they were in the 3 going against someone else. They always lined up right next to each other. And then when the East and the West would come together, all 4 of them would be, because there were 2 of them on the East and 2 of them on the West. All 4 of them would come together. And I asked them about it. I got a chance to interview these guys and talk to each one of them for several minutes. And with each one of them, I said, I noticed you guys just seem to pal around, and they talked about how close they are. These guys have had a group text chain, a group chat that they've had together for almost a full year now, before any of them had committed anywhere. The 4 of them had put together this group chat, and they were talking all the time. And I am absolutely convinced you can talk about what a great recruiter Coach K is, and Jeff Capel helping him out, and John Shire also played lead on some of the recruiting here. But I'm convinced that these 4 guys decided together, all 4 of them, that they wanted to play in the same place.
Hey, Jason, the text chain was a very big topic of conversation during the actual game tonight. Anytime they were interviewing any of the Duke committed players, they were talking about the text chain, and they even mentioned someone asked whether E.J. Montgomery had been added to that text chain, and they said not yet, but we're working on him. So I thought that was pretty funny.
Right, and it's worth noting, by the way, that E.J. Montgomery goes to and played on the same high school team that R.J. Barrett is on. They both played at Monteverde Academy, which is one of the finest basketball programs in the country. And you have to feel like, Duke has a little bit of a leg up on E.J. Montgomery because he has such a good relationship with R.J. Barrett. And through that, he's developing a really good relationship with the other guys on the Duke team. And I noticed, more so than anyone else on the McDonald's teams, it felt to me like EJ was hanging out with the 4 Duke guys more than anyone else was. So a couple other really quick impressions that I had. I'll start with Zion Williamson. Zion Williamson's short. I mean, I don't know if you could see it, Donald. Did it stand out? Did he seem kind of short when you watched him in the McDonald's game?
Honestly, no. And I think it's because I feel like a lot of these guys are their height that's listed is be an inch or 2 higher than it actually is. So when they list him at 6'7", 6'8", he looked as tall as a lot of the players. And here's the thing. I saw a picture of the 4 of the guys together, and he was standing next to Reddish and Barrett, and he actually had an inch on them in the picture. Now, I don't know if it's because someone was slouching, whatever, but
no, it was a perspective. He was on the end, and he was forward a little bit. I saw the picture you're talking about.
Yeah,
it was a perspective thing. I'm telling you, I walked in that gym, and all the guys were sort of lined up next to each other. They were doing like a walkthrough kind of thing, and so you could really, I was at their level. It wasn't looking down on them because everything was ground level. There are no stands or anything like that. He's short. He's listed at 6'7". I've heard he measures 6'6". I'm telling you, he's more like 6'5". But you know what? It does not matter because he is
Charles Barkley, right?
Exactly. Charles Barkley's probably 6'4".
Yeah, he was listed 6'4".
And if you wanted to rebound against Charles Barkley, you couldn't. So
and you can't against Zion Williamson either. Playing against nothing but freaks, athletic freaks. I mean, because all these McDonald's All-American guys, every single one of these guys is probably going to be in the NBA at some point. These are the kind of players that, immediately stand out at the college level. They are absolute studs, and they are elite athletes. They're freaks. Playing amongst the freaks, Zion Williamson is even more of a freak than everybody else. His ability to elevate, his physicality. I mean, the guy he's cut, he's chiseled, he's huge. It's really remarkable. And there were a couple times during the practice where he went up for lobs or he got a lane to the basket and he elevated for dunks. And, it takes a lot to impress an NBA scout who's used to watching James Harden and LeBron James and the very, very greatest athletes in the world. You could tell those NBA scouts were like, damn, did I just see that? I mean, Zion Williamson is impressive. And I'll tell you one other thing about him. I thought that this guy was going to be one of these kind of, physical specimens who didn't have skills. I really liked his ball handling was good. He passed the ball very nicely. and he was able to drift out to the perimeter, and he was draining shots from the perimeter. This is not going to be a guy who's going to take 4, 5, 6 3-pointers a game at Duke, but I think he'll take a couple threes a game, and I think he'll hit a pretty decent percentage of them. And I really like the possibility of him and Cameron Reddish and R.J. Barrett being able to switch any position that those guys, their quickness, their athleticism, their length, and their size, I think allows any one of the three of those guys to cover just about any player on the floor. So our ability to switch next year is going to be really interesting and really impressive.
Provided they can learn how to play man-to-man defense, right? I mean,
yep.
We hope that's the case. But
yes,
you never know. Jason, I did want to ask you before you got to the rest of the guys, and I had prompted you before the show, so you should be ready for this. The thing that I'm worried about looking at them kind of from a distance, because I haven't dug into the recruiting tapes too much. I've read the scouting reports. I've seen bits and pieces. My concern about this team next year is that it's going to feature these three big players in Barrett, Reddish, and Williamson. And I do want you to talk a little more about Barrett and Reddish, because I feel like for being the number 1 and number 3 players in the class, we haven't heard enough about them. But how do you think they all fit together on the offensive side of the ball? Because the concern is that, well, all of them are big wings who aren't elite shooters. So none of them's going to be able to wait around on the wing while the other guys are working inside. And presumably, if the starting lineup next year is them with point guard Trey Jones and big man Marquise Bolden, who we also know is not able to step outside, are you not concerned that we're going to have a crowded lane on offense next year?
I think it's a little bit possible. I will say that Cameron Reddish is a very good outside shooter. I think Cam is going to be able to hit pretty nicely from the outside. And in the McDonald's 3-point contest, he was one of the co-winners of the contest. He's a very good outside shooter. The reason I think these guys will succeed on offense and defense is because college basketball, and we saw it this year, Duke playing 2 bigs was unusual. College basketball is a guards game. It's a perimeter game. And having guys like this who can do a little bit of everything that's the way college basketball is moving. I mean, most of the teams out there nowadays are playing 4 perimeter guys around 1 big guy. And I think that's what Duke is going to do last year. In fact, I think there's a possibility you'll see Duke play 5 perimeter guys at times next year. These guys are all big enough and athletic enough that they can go inside and rebound. I mean, it's not like we're talking perimeter guys who are 6'3", 6'4", in Reddish.
It's not 3 Grayson Allens, right? It's
exactly.
more like 3 Grant
Jason
Hill
Tatum's
type guys.
Yeah, Grant Hill, Jason Tatum type guys, who are able to play multiple positions. They can rebound if you need them to rebound. They can step outside if you need them to step outside. And the other thing I was going to mention about these players is, don't get hung up in thinking there are only 2 things that can be done in basketball. Don't get hung up in thinking you can either put the ball in the post the way we did to Carter and Bagley this year, or you can take a 3-pointer the way we did with Grayson Allen and Gary Trent this year. There's another aspect to basketball, and that's a mid-range game. And these guys have spectacular mid-range game, especially R.J. Barrett. R.J. Barrett, I don't care what defense you're playing, you clog the lane, R.J. Barrett is going to shoot 8, 10-footers over you, around you. He has a beautiful fadeaway shot where he takes you into the post and then he shoots a little fadeaway, the same way Kobe Bryant did, the same way Michael Jordan did. Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan made a fortune off of back you down and then shoot a fadeaway, because you can't block it. If they're fading away, there's no way you can get to it. And those guys were able to hit that shot again. And what I saw from practice from R.J. Barrett was a guy who's going to be able to do that same kind of thing. So the mid-range game these guys are going to be able to play, I think, is going to be really impressive. And the last thing I'll say about them is Cam Reddish and Trey Jones, but Cam Reddish especially, special passer, finds the tiny windows that are hard to see and is able to see angles on the floor that other people are not. And that creates offense for you because it looks like a guy isn't open right up until the moment that Cam Reddish finds a way to get him the ball so that he has an easy shot for 2 points. And so I think that's how these guys are going to succeed.
Jason, that was great. Donald, I want to get to you because you actually got to watch the McDonald's game. Does Jason's assessment hold up in real time? Not that the McDonald's game is the best indicator of the all-around game, but you do get kind of that all-star feel to it. What did you see there? How does it compare to what Jason was talking about with the skill sets of the different guys? And in particular, I do want to hear a little bit more about Trey Jones because Duke fans are probably going to maybe unfairly compare him to his brother and say, well, we're just getting Tyus Jones back. He's going to hit tons of big shots. He's going to play within himself. He's going to work well with other guards, all those things that Tyus Jones seemed immediately able to do. So why don't you start with Trey Jones, but give me your general impressions from the game of the Duke guys.
Well, Jay Will said during the broadcast that Trey Jones was a cerebral player, and he really showed that tonight. I tend to agree with his assessment on there. So he really does a good job of seeing the floor. He could read a defense or, this game, lack thereof, because this really isn't a game about defense, although there were some defensive moments. But his way of he can always find the right way to attack a defense, whether it's going to the lane himself, doing a floater, shooting a three, making the right pass. He's very good in that regard. And I think that is where his game is going to really enhance everybody else's on the floor in a way similar to Tyus Jones. And I don't want to start comparing him to his brother, but he brings a similar game. And I think that's why I feel so at ease with him handling the ball next year, because we saw it with Tyus Jones and Trey Jones. Tyus has said that Trey, in a way, in a lot of different aspects, is better than him. And if that's the case, then we're in good hands next year. And I think that was the case tonight. He can shoot, but like Jason said, him and Cameron Reddish are incredible passers. They combined for 17 assists in this game. And now it wasn't just like throwing the ball down the court to somebody who was waiting for a dunk. A lot of these were great passes, finding the open man, creating something in the lane and dishing off to somebody else for a three. They were really good at seeing the lane. Cameron Reddish, great handles, great stroke. He had 11 points, 9 assists. And here's the thing about him. We talked about, you asked about how to fit these wings together in a lineup. I think Cameron could be the glue guy in a way that, of the freshman at least, because he's not going to be the one that's going to ask for the ball all the time. He's not going to, want to bring the ball up all the time. He's going to do what needs to be done. And I think he's good. He's very good at a lot of different things. And I think that's going to help rotations, is going to help, especially, and this is where is really going to be interesting, when these guys are not all in a game together, because there's going to be times where Javin DeLaurier is going to play, Marquise Bolden is going to play, Alex O'Connell is going to play. When these guys are meshing in with each other, I think Cameron Reddish will still be able to be an excellent ball player with anybody that's on the court. And I think that is a really good dynamic to bring, especially for a guy who's, he's one of the top 3 guys in the class and people did not really talk about him.
Can I try to make an unfair comparison for him?
Go ahead.
Tell me what you think, because what you were just describing to me sounds like what Theo Pinson did for UNC this year, but with a lot more sort of physical gifts.
Yes, he's a lot more athletic, and he has a lot more, of these skills, shooting and ball handling. But yes, a guy that's going to literally, throw himself around if he needs to. If he needs to grab rebounds, he'll grab rebounds. If he needs to dish out 10 assists, he'll do that. And I think that is really, really good about his game. RJ Barrett, he was one of the stars of the game. 26 points, 10 of 14 shooting. If his team had won, they lost by 3. If his team had won, he probably would have been the most outstanding player of the game. He can finish with either hand. He was able to drive to the hole at will and was incredibly smooth. The funny part, when I think Jason, he talked about this, but when he spoke with you, but he also did it on the broadcast. He mentioned that he tries to model his game after LeBron James and James Harden. But what I saw out there, the smoothness of his game is more suited to Kevin Durant. And I'm not saying that he has the length of Kevin Durant. He obviously doesn't. But the way that he can shoot a three, the way that he can drive a lane with ease, the way he got and ones like it was nothing. I mean, that sort of smoothness and calmness about his game is really, really reminding me a lot of Kevin Durant. So I think we're in good hands there. Lastly, Zion Williamson. He was a freak of nature tonight. The one concerning thing, but I think it should be fine over the thing. He finished with 8 points. He had to leave the game because he tried to drive the lane late in the second half, and it appeared to dislocate his thumb. Now, I don't know if it was dislocated, but they showed on the replay and it bent backwards, so it might be one of those things where it's jammed. We probably won't see him on the rest of the all-star circuits that they have, over the next coming weeks. But the dude is a freak of nature. He's so powerful, and the one thing that I think is I have something I've never seen from a high school player of his caliber. I've never seen someone so powerful with his opposite hand. He routinely attack. He's a left-hander, but he routinely attacked from the right side. He can dunk with power from the right side. He has a soft touch with his right side, and he has the ability to create with either hand. So those sort of things, when people are comparing him to Charles Barkley, he said he wants to model his game after LeBron James. And the one thing LeBron James does very well is he is very good with his opposite hand. That's what Zion Williamson can do. And hopefully his thumb gets better, and he doesn't need to really play the rest of these games. But it's clear that he's one of the top talents of this class. And him, Barrett, Reddish, and Trey Jones can do some absolute damage next year.
Jason, did you have anything you wanted to finish off on the McDonald's All-American game or the recruiting situation for Duke for this high school class?
No, not really. I do want to mention one thing about EJ Montgomery. Who's the lone kid that Duke is still out there recruiting. And we mentioned him a little bit earlier. I really liked what I saw from him at the practices. I think he'd be a great complement to these guys because he's a little bit bigger. He's 6'9", almost 6'10". Actually, EJ Montgomery, he's listed at 6'10".
He's listed at 7 foot. Yeah.
Is he?
He didn't look 7 foot to me. He probably looked, I'd say he's probably 6'10".
Okay, 6'10", 6'11", whatever it may be. He's a little bit bigger than these other guys, and he's a little more comfortable in the lane, playing sort of a center kind of role. As a result, I think he'd be a really, really nice fit with these guys who are already here. I suspect that he hasn't announced anything because he's waiting to see. There is, I don't want to speculate too much, but there is a little bit of talk that it's possible that Marquise Bolden will declare for the NBA draft. There was talk about that last year, and he didn't have a good season. But
that doesn't seem like a good idea for him, does it?
So here's my question to you: if he knows he wants to go in the NBA, if he knows he wants to play pro basketball, do you really think that playing next year at Duke is going to develop him more than playing next year in the NBA, where he would be playing basketball full time, where he would have no limits on the amount of practice he could put in, where there's
just
no
don't
limit
know
on the number of coaches. I mean,
I just don't know that anyone is going to take a take him with one of their 1 or 2 draft picks, because we just haven't seen him do that much on the court that looks NBA ready. I think that the key for the NBA draft is that teams want you to have some NBA ready skill. Like Gary Trent's going to go out this year, almost certainly, right? We've talked about that here, that we don't expect to see Gary Trent back at Duke next year. Gary Trent is not an elite athlete, I don't think, relative to the NBA. He's not a great on-ball defender. He basically has one NBA skill, and that's shooting. And that alone is going to possibly make him a first-round pick. Otherwise, he's not ready for the NBA, but he's still going to go. I don't know what Marquise Bolden and look at Trayvon Duval, who, again, is someone we know has a lot of ups and downs. He had a lot of issues this year, sort of gelling with the team on the court. I can't speak for off the court. But again, Duval gets into the lane like an NBA player. And honestly, I think that some of his problems this year were that the guys around him were not used to playing with a point guard who could move that quickly. And so they weren't able to react along with him. I think he's going to be happier in the NBA where his teammates are able to react quickly. That said, Duval didn't display any kind of shooting ability this year. We've talked about that extensively. He has all kinds of holes in his game. Again, though, he's probably going to be a first-round pick on account of his ability to drive the lane. I don't know what Marquise Bolden does that makes him worth an NBA draft pick.
He's long and he's big.
But lots of I think there are plenty of guys who are his size who can move better than
Sam, I don't know that it's going to happen. I'm not the one giving him advice.
Sure.
I probably would not tell him to do it. I'm merely saying it's a possibility. And but I'll also say this, if he doesn't go to the NBA draft, I think, getting this back to where I started with it, I think EJ Montgomery looks at Duke and wonders a little bit about how much time he would be able to get if he came here. I don't know that EJ Montgomery sees himself.
I was going to say, does he see himself as a one and done type player? Because I didn't get that impression from the recruiting rankings and the general chatter about him.
I mean, he's in the ballpark. He's not someone he's not top 10. He's not someone who's an automatic one and done, but in the right situation at the right kind of moment, I think he could be. If he blossoms nicely. I thought he played really well in the practice that I saw. He finished exceptionally well in the lane. His touch in the paint was very, very good. So I don't know that if you're EJ Montgomery and you look at the Duke roster as it currently appears to be configured, you would wonder about where you're going to get playing time because you're going to be fighting Bolden and Delorier for playing time, in the post, and maybe you would figure, maybe I can get a little bit of time backing up Zion Williamson at the 4 at power forward. But that's not a formula where you go, there's an easy 20 plus minutes a game for me there. Even though I think EJ Montgomery is a very, very good player, and I think he would push Bolden and Delorier, and it's not even impossible to imagine that he would start over them. But it's not a sure thing. I wonder a little bit if maybe the reason we haven't heard anything from EJ Montgomery is that he's waiting to hear about that. And then I'll tell you the other thing he may be waiting on. And I was almost going to do this as a parting shot, but screw it. I'm going to do it now. I'm going to make a prediction right now. You're going to laugh. Do you know who the coach of the year in college basketball is going to be next year? Because I do.
Who's that?
It's going to be Bryce Drew of Vanderbilt. And the reason I think Bryce Drew...
Okay.
Hang on. Let's record. It is March 28th of 2018. At this time next year, we will be talking about Bryce Drew as one of the front runners for Coach of the Year in college basketball. And the reason why is because Bryce Drew is in the process of putting together, as great as Duke's class is, Bryce Drew, I think, may be in the process of putting together the second best recruiting class in the country. He already has a point guard named Darius Garland, who played very, very nicely in the McDonald's All-American game tonight.
Very smooth.
Yeah, really good point guard who's coming in as a freshman. He's got a big man, a forward, Shimisola Shitu. That is not a bad word. Who's from Canada. He's actually good friends with RJ Barrett. He and RJ were palling around a lot and talking about the fact that Canadian basketball is making big inroads, but Shitu is going to Vanderbilt, and I think Vanderbilt is the front runner for Romeo Langford, who was as impressive as anyone I saw at the practices. Incredible athlete. Also looking at Kansas, also looking at Kentucky, but I really think Romeo Langford is going to go to Vanderbilt. And when Romeo Langford declares for Vanderbilt, I think that is going to entice EJ Montgomery to also go to Vandy. I really think there's a strong possibility that Vanderbilt is going to have 4 really, really good McDonald's All-Americans. That is more than Kentucky. That's more than Kansas. That's more than UNC. That's more than anyone except Duke that also has 4. And if Vandy does that, they're going to be a preseason top 10, top 15 team, and Bryce Drew will be early front runner for Coach of the Year. So,
wow, that's a big prediction. I do want to move on because we have a couple more things we need to discuss. The first being, and we'll make this quick, but we did want to highlight, there was an interesting article in The Undefeated this week by William Roden that extensively quoted Wendell Carter's mother, who, if you've watched any Duke games this year, you know who she is. She usually dresses rather garishly on the sideline and is cheering as hard as she can, sort of in the Chucky Okafor mold. But Wendell Carter's mother was quoted as saying, among other things, she was talking about sort of the business of basketball and the whole one and done situation. Obviously, her son has long been assumed to be a one and done player. And she said, if you look at the pros and cons of this is about choosing college basketball is a big con. From a business perspective, college is 100% risk and it's 100% negative to your business objective. It's not putting you in any better position for achieving your business objective, which is reaching the NBA. So it was kind of an interesting quote, I thought, and I do want to give it to you guys for your reactions too, because Wendell Carter's mother, if you guys remember during Wendell's recruitment, was pushing him towards Harvard. There was a lot written about how much she liked the idea of him going to Harvard because of the education and the doors it would open. Ultimately, he picked Duke, and there was some sort of lingering disappointment from her, even though once he got to campus and was in the games and everything, she was fully engaged in it. So it seems a little bit like she's kind of talking out of two sides of her mouth, because on the one hand, she valued the education. Duke isn't Harvard, we know that, but is pretty close when you consider the grand scheme of all the schools that Wendell Carter could have picked. And at the same time, seems like she really appreciates the business of basketball. And from our perspective, and we're all pretty biased because we're Duke alums and we support the program, doesn't seem like there's any program you'd want to go to over Duke when it comes to the connections within the game of basketball. Mike Krzyzewski, of course, spent 10 years as the USA coach. He's pretty universally respected among NBA circles as a premier college coach. He has former players who are playing on over half the teams in the league. There are coaches and GMs and scouts and directors of basketball operations all over college and the NBA that are Duke alums or former Coach K assistants. They're all over the place. So for the business of basketball, it seems to me like there's nowhere else you'd want to go than Duke. So it does seem a little weird from the perspective of the mother of a top recruit and ultimately someone who's going to be a top pick, that she would think that going to college is 100% negative to your business objective. Donald, what did you think of Wendell Carter's mom's comments here?
So there's two hypotheses that I have. The first one, I want to read another quote that's in the article, and she talks about the NCAA, and she goes, "It's a big con. Let the NCAA deal with those second tier players and build their empire off them. Let the one and dones go and build their empires with their skill set." Now, I think the first thing is she's a mom. Like she does not give two craps about the NCAA. All she cares about is the welfare and the future business making of her son. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm saying that that's her job. She's looking out for Wendell. And I think she probably thinks that the NCAA, no matter what, has set up the system in NBA in a way too, because it's their rule. They've set up the system that allows them to profit off of her son for a year or for how long, when in any other sport or most other professions, I won't say all, but most of the professions, they don't have to go to high school to get to the top level of what they want to do. And I think the second thing, and this is the probably the bigger hypothesis, you were talking about how she talked so highly about going to Harvard and how she wanted Wendell to go and the business of basketball. I think this quote about the NCAA leads me to believe what she's thinking about Harvard, and that Harvard, and I think this goes for a lot of majors, Harvard is further removed from that empire. No one goes to Harvard and talks about how they're making money off of these players. They're talking about the blue bloods when they talk about that. So maybe in a way, when she was talking about wanting Wendell to go to Harvard, she wanted the education, but she also wanted the NCAA to be further removed from profitizing off. So
she's kind of separating the basketball brand development from the education.
Yeah, in a way. And it's like, look, like, again, when people talk about paying players, they're not talking about paying players at Colorado State football. They're not talking about paying players at
Hey, shout out, go Rammies.
Go Rammies.
That's one of my local squads.
They have great jerseys, by the way. But
they do. I like them a lot.
They're not talking about paying those players. They're not talking about paying, honestly, they're not even talking about paying like women's basketball at UConn. They're talking about, paying Duke basketball players, UNC basketball players, Alabama football players, Georgia football players, the people who are bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions, for the NCAA. So I think she, in a way, is looped that in, and she's saying Harvard is well removed from that. And when I say go to Harvard and have an education and play ball, you're not really wrapped up in that system.
Okay, I can get that. Jason, was there anything you wanted to add about Mrs. Carter's comments, or can we move to the next topic?
The only thing I would say very, very quickly is she is honestly and brutally revealing the absolute absurdity of the current system, which is a system that forces kids who don't necessarily want to be playing for free. It forces them to play for free, and they shouldn't be required to. They are. I mean, there's no question that Wendell Carter was physically, emotionally, and skill-wise ready to play for money. He was ready to play in the NBA, and he should have been allowed to. And all she's really doing is she's saying, this system's broken. It's not right. And someone please fix it so other kids don't get stuck the way my son did. And she said, we had a great time at Duke. We loved Duke. It was a fabulous experience. But he should have been gotten paid. He should have gotten paid this year. And she's right. That's all I can say.
Well, I think it'll be interesting to revisit these comments as the months and years go on and we learn more about how the NBA and the NCAA sort of evolve with all the issues around college basketball.
And by the way, it feels like her comments were directed at the NCAA and that she is angry and frustrated at the NCAA. And a lot of people say, oh, the NCAA is what screwed up. I want to be clear about something. The NCAA is not the problem here. The problem is the NBA. The NCAA is merely adhering to the rules that the NBA has put in place. The NBA, and specifically the Players Association, are the ones who say you must spend a year in college before you declare for the draft.
Or 1 year after high school. And you can do whatever you want with it. But for the time being...
Shout out LiAngelo.
Yeah, shout out to LiAngelo Ball, who will not be doing that. Or LaMelo.
Yeah. People know what I'm talking about, though. But it's... I want to be very clear. It is not the NCAA's fault. It is the fault of the NBA and the NBA Players Association who have made the rules about who can come into their league. And
it's kind of interesting to think about if the NBA got rid of one and done and just let the players come out of high school, would there be such a groundswell about paying the players and changing the amateur model, do you think?
I think that what you would see happen is there would be kids who will say, I want to play for money. And there'll be kids who say, I want to develop my skills in college. And they would follow two completely separate tracks. And there'd be some intermingling. You would see some kids go to college and after 1 year say, oh, wow, you know what? I didn't realize how good I was. I'm ready for the NBA. But for the most part, I think you would see kids staying. I'm not even talking about there being a to and through rule or a baseball model where you have to stay 3 years. I think that if you just made it open to everybody, the guys who really are ready and really want to get to the NBA quickly would get to the NBA immediately. And the guys who go to college would stay in college longer.
It's an interesting thing to think about. And I'm sure this will not be the last time we discuss the amateur model and how it relates to Duke and college basketball. We'll have this conversation many more times before there's resolution. This episode of the Duke Basketball Report podcast is brought to you by the gentlemen of Bird Campbell, PA, with law offices in Florida and Texas, a law firm started by Duke grads and former Duke roommates. Bird Campbell says, go to hell, Carolina, and let's go Duke. So one more topic we've got tonight. If you don't remember, the last couple seasons we've done the stats prediction game here on the podcast. So we come up with a list of categories that we're all going to pick winners in, and we do it right at the beginning of the season. And we forgot on Sunday, in the midst of our sadness over the end of the season coming so suddenly, to recap the stats game. So I went back through our notes and I've tallied the stats game, and I want to quickly run down how we did. So, and then at the end, I'll everyone, if you're following along, you could certainly tally and figure out the winner, but I'll announce the winner at the end. So the first category was most points. We all, guys, in general, the stats game, we sort of underestimated the Marvin Bagley effect. I don't think we appreciated that Marvin Bagley was going to be statistically the greatest freshman that Duke has ever seen. So in the first category for most points, we all said that Grayson Allen was going to score the most points this year, but we instituted a tiebreaker. And so I said that Wendell Carter was going to score the second most points. Donald said that Marvin Bagley was going to score the second most points. And Jason said that Gary Trent was going to score the second most points. So Grayson Allen had 572 points. Marvin Bagley had 694 points this year. It's the second most points by an ACC freshman in ACC history. So Donald takes the first category. So congratulations to him.
Yes.
The second category was most rebounds. So I had Bagley, and both Donald and Jason had Wendell Carter. And Bagley, in 4 fewer games, just barely edged out Carter. He was 366. Carter had 335. So I take number 2. We'll move on to number 3, which was block shots. Donald and I both had Wendell Carter. Jason had Marvin Bagley, and Carter by far had the most. He had 76 block shots on the season. Bagley actually only had 29 and was just one ahead of Marquise Bolden. So that one goes to Sam and Donald. The fourth category was assist. We all said Trevon Duval and didn't even pick a backup. So he did actually lead the team in assists. So good work to all of us for identifying who the point guard was.
I finally got one right.
Yep. We also, in the fifth category for most steals, we all also said Trevon Duval, and it was Grayson Allen. So we're done.
But it was close. It was kind of close.
It was kind of close, but Grayson won. So nobody gets a point there. Highest field goal percentage. Now here's an interesting one. The sixth category was highest field goal percentage, and it was minimum 2 attempts per game. That's where we set it at. So, excuse me, by far the winner in this category was Javin DeLaurier. But I had Marvin Bagley, Donald had Marvin Bagley, Jason had Wendell Carter. Among those 2 players, Marvin Bagley had the highest number, although he was third on the team behind both Javin DeLaurier and Marquise Bolden, who both did attempt more than 2 shots per game. I did double check that. So it does go to me and Donald. Bagley had
y'all get points even though you came in third?
Yeah, because it was among the group. You'll okay. I think you benefit from this at some point too. Highest 3-point percentage. Here's another one. So Donald's going to take this. Yeah, Donald's going to take this one because he got Gary Trent. Wendell Carter actually led the team. He was hitting almost. Actually, no, sorry. Trent
Alex
was
O'Connell
third at 40. Trent was third at 40. Alex O'Connell had hit 48.9% of his threes, and we set this at minimum 1/2 of a 3-pointer per game. So Alex O'Connell was almost 50%. Carter was 41%. Grayson was all the way down at 5th on the team. He was 37%, and that's who Jason and I both took. So Donald got that one because he picked Gary Trent. Total wins, guys, this was a bad one. So
we got to go over this one.
So Duke won 29 games this year. Last year we did this also. Duke won 28 games, and it was a similar bloodbath. But I was the one who had the most tempered expectations for the team because I only picked 34. Donald 34. And Jason both picked 37.
Oh boy.
So it was pretty close. But I took that category. True road wins is another one that we got totally massacred in based on our blinding optimism. So Duke had 6 true road wins this year. I predicted 9, which is again the smallest number. Donald had 10. Jason had 11. So I'm going to take that category. Category number 10 was ACC teams.
What was I thinking?
ACC teams in the tournament. ACC teams in the tournament. We actually under predicted this one. Donald picked 7. Jason and I both picked 8. 9 ACC teams made the tournament. So Jason and I both get a point in that category for ACC teams. That was pretty good. Well done to the ACC and all those middling 9 and 11 seeds who got in.
And Syracuse, who made it to the Sweet 16 as an 11.
And exactly. We had category number 11 was how many Blue Devils would score 25 points in a game. So Jason and I both picked 4, which was the right answer. Donald picked 5. And I did go back through. Bagley did it 7 times. Grayson Allen did it 4 times. Gary Trent did it twice. Wendell Carter only had one 25-point game, and it was that hilarious blowout against Evansville back in December. Duval never got to 25. So Jason and I both got that one. Donald did not. Here was another wasted category. I asked you guys to rank the 4 big men in terms of minutes played, and we all got it right. So it was Marvin Bagley, followed by Wendell Carter, then Javin DeLaurier and Marquise Bolden, and we were all correct. So nobody gets any credit for that. Category number 13, Jordan Goldwire's total minutes. So we had a lot of discussion at the beginning of the season about the guard rotation because we weren't sure among Goldwire and Alex O'Connell and Jordan Tucker who was gonna get minutes. Obviously, Jordan Tucker ended up transferring. Jordan Goldwire ended up playing 169, which is very close to the number that Jason guessed, which was 160. So Jason's going to get this one because I guessed 237.
I had some wild ass one, didn't I?
Donald had 328.
Yeah, I did. Yep.
Now, here comes the much more surprising one based on our
the Alex O'Connell
one.
Yeah. Alex O'Connell total minutes. He ended up with 373. Donald wins the category because he had the highest guess at 144. Jason had 130 and I had 73. I really had no dreams for Alex O'Connell this season. So shouts to him for just beating us entirely on our optimism for him. The 15th category, how many games will Justin Robinson appear in? He outdid all of our predictions. So Jason predicted 14. He's going to take it. Donald and I both said 9. And he appeared in 17 games. So good for Justin Robinson.
And he had some nice appearances too. He did.
He had a couple of good dunks.
It wasn't all garbage either. It was it was somewhere in the middle of the game.
First half against Pitt, he was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So shouts to him. And then the last category was how many 100-point games. So thank God this year we didn't have any of us guess 10 or anything. Jason actually nailed it.
Who would do that? Oh, that was me.
There were only 3. If you don't, guys, last night I went back and listened to big chunks of this episode from last year, and oh my goodness, the amount of stupidity that the 3 of us put out was incredible. But Donald had the best because he guessed that Duke would score 100 points 10 times last year. They only did it twice. They did it 3 times this year. Jason nailed that one. I guessed 2. Donald guessed 4, which was very reasonable. So Jason got that last category. So in total, Jason and Donald both tied with 5 points in the predictions game, and I got 7. So I am the champion this year of the stats prediction game. So congratulations to me. Thank you very much.
Wait, hang on. Can we get a redraw, revote, something?
What do you want to know? What do you want to know? I will say
I'd like to revise my picks. I bet ask me again. I bet I can get them all.
Yeah, I can get them right. I can get them right this time.
Sure. So
I feel a lot better about my ability to predict the season right now.
I will say that last year you guys tied for the victory. So I have pulled back with you, although I think Jason won the first year.
Yes, he did.
So Jason's still ahead 2-1 in the all-time stats prediction game. I do want to mention, because I talked about how I listened to last year's season prediction recap. The way that we were talking about the team a year ago was, all right, so Grayson's gone and Luke Kennard is gone, and we're really excited to see how Frank Jackson develops as a sophomore.
Nope.
So great work, guys. The one other thing we talked about last year that
By the way, crazy thought. The last time we saw Frank Jackson play is the last time Frank Jackson played.
Wait, is that true?
He sat out the entire season.
Really?
Yeah, he's not going to play at all for New Orleans this year. He was hurt the whole year.
Bummer. Stinks for him.
Yeah,
maybe he should.
Stinks for him, but he made $1 million.
Yeah, that's true. I would have liked to make $1 million this year. So you can sponsor the podcast. You can email us. We'll get to that at the end. There was one other thing we talked about at the end of last year's recap episode that was fun. We asked who will be Duke's next celebrated senior, and we had this conversation in the context of, Grayson Allen's definitely leaving. Like, he shouldn't come back. All it's going to do is hurt him. And we ended up having a mostly pretty fun celebration for Grayson Allen this year. I think we talked a lot about how much we appreciate his contributions to the program, and he had a lovely senior night. So in that episode, Jason predicted that Javin DeLaurier was the next big celebrated senior, and Donald and I both predicted that Antonio Vrankovic would be the next celebrated senior. So
I'm feeling better about my pick. I'm feeling better about mine than yours.
And here's the thing, man, Javin's got to like play more for that to end up being a thing, because it's one thing to like be a senior and get there and graduate and everything, but it's not like he's had that much court time. He was the third big man this year, and he may not start next year. So I don't know. We'll see. I don't think that Donald's prediction and my prediction of Vrankovic is going to do us.
Actually, I'm looking forward to him developing the Zubek effect and
okay,
and bringing home a national championship next year, and then we'll win.
All right.
I will be so happy to present you all with the prize if that happens.
Yeah, we'll see. So I don't think that I win anything other than pride for winning the stats game. And before we wrap with parting shots, a couple things. First of all, we have the DBR brackets challenge. So even though all of Jason and Donald and I can't win anymore because we stink, some other folks were not picking Duke all the way in the bracket challenge. And I looked back over the game. It looks like there are a number of people who are still in it and who can still get points. More importantly, I don't think there are scenarios where a particular set of games ends up happening and then we get like a whole bunch of winners together. It seems like everybody who can still accumulate points is all at like different they're all at different like exact numbers based on like how many early round games they won. So it's not clear yet who's going to win the DBR bracket challenge, but if you're if you got a few Final Four teams right, go in, check, see how you did. As we mentioned at the beginning of the tournament, the winner of the DBR bracket challenge will be invited on to do a segment with us on the podcast sometime in the near future. So we'll figure all that out next week after the tournament is over. And so I want to close this episode of the show where I just want to remind everybody, it's been 3 days since the season ended. There have been no Duke games, and we've gone on now over an hour in this show. So lots of things to talk about, but I want to pick our players of the year because we didn't do that on Sunday, and we did do it last year. And then we'll do parting shots if anybody has any. So I will start with Jason. Jason, who is your player of the year for Duke basketball 2017-2018?
I'm going with Marvin Bagley. I don't know who you guys are going to pick, but I don't know that there's anyone else you could possibly pick. A couple of weeks ago, I spoke about the fact that this guy, that there have been five total 30-15 games in Duke history, and he has 4 of them. 21 points per game, 11.1 rebounds per game. He was absolutely dominant at times against some really good competition. So not a difficult choice for me. I don't think it's that much of a competition. Marvin Bagley, I thought, was the player of the year, the greatest freshman season we've ever seen at Duke.
Donald?
I'm going to go with leadership. I'm going to go with the guy who has been really the rock of the team. He helped lead us. Grayson Allen was that guy this year, and he gave so much to the program. And for that, my player of the year is Marvin Bagley III.
That was impressive. I like that. I'm going to make it 3 for 3. So last year we all picked Luke Kennard, and this year we're all picking Marvin Bagley. All I wrote in my notes about Marvin Bagley, because I knew in my mind that Jason was gonna do the stats rundown. All I wrote is, "We'll never see his like again," and now his watch is ended. If you're a Game of Thrones fan, you'll appreciate that. You won't see a player like Marvin Bagley ever again in college basketball. The maturity of his offensive game is like you guys remember Jabari Parker in college. Marvin Bagley is like way better than Jabari Parker was, and Jabari Parker when he came was amazing. So congratulations to Marvin Bagley. Among all the accolades that you have received, including a AP First Team All-American nod, and all the accolades that you will be receiving in the future, you've got DBR Podcast 2018 Player of the Year under your belt. The trophy is on its way, I guess. Maybe I don't know if we'll make.
Think about this regarding Marvin Bagley. The term second jump hadn't really been heard until Marvin Bagley came along, and we probably heard it and spoke it dozens and dozens of times on this podcast over the past year. Mm-hmm. It's almost like a new term was invented. A new aspect of measuring basketball was invented so that we could talk about how great Marvin Bagley was.
I want to go to parting shots before we get out of here. Donald, what is your parting shot for this episode?
Okay, guys. So the scene is a Red Sox Cubs spring training game on Monday. And I don't know if you guys saw this. It was live on ESPN. And what they're doing during spring training, which is now over, is they were interviewing people in the field. So for this game, they were interviewing Red Sox right fielder Mookie Betts. During the game, he's in right field. And while he's giving an answer to a question, a Cubs player just rockets one to right field. So mid-answer, Betts starts to run towards the ball and realizes there's no way he's catching this baseball. So he says to the guys in the booth while running, "I ain't getting this one, boys." The guys, so everyone's cracking up in the booth.
Donald, you can't really do justice to the inflection, so everyone needs to go watch the clip.
Yes, I will post it in the thread, but it's absolutely hilarious. The guys in the booth are cracking up. He's tracking the ball down, and one of the guys in the booth actually reminds Betts to hit the cutoff man while the Cubs player is running into third base.
It's really
good.
So
it just reminds me that opening day for Major League Baseball is tomorrow. And while my Tigers are expected to be one of the worst teams in baseball, it does not quell my excitement for the dawn of a new beginning of a new season. But a hilarious moment in one of the final spring training games. I ain't getting this one, boys. That sums up the season sometimes.
Really great one. Jason, your parting shot.
So just very, very quickly, at the start of our podcast last week, or just a few days ago, I should say, I spoke the words and I said, I don't know why anyone would want to listen to this podcast, because I knew we were about to spend a great deal of time talking about the end of Duke's season and the loss to Kansas. And I said it sort of jokingly. I didn't mean it seriously. Obviously, I am thrilled that a lot of you chose to listen to the podcast, and I knew you would, because you all have been wonderful, faithful fans. But I just wanted to say, I think it was really sweet. Guys, I'm sure you noticed the same thing. We were kind of flooded with emails with people who wrote to us at dbrpodcast@gmail.com and said, "Hey guys, I just wanted to let you know I love the podcast and I listened even though we lost." And I just thought it was great that, you don't get that kind of feedback from the community all the time, immediate feedback. But the past couple of days, we've gotten probably a half dozen, 8, maybe even 10 emails from people who say, "We love the podcast. Thanks for what you're doing. You helped me deal with my grief. And I listened." And so I just want to say back to all of you, thank you so much for listening. We appreciate it.
It was really great. Actually, one of my friends, Josh, texted me and said, Sam, let Jason know that I'm listening to the podcast, just in case he didn't know. So yeah, we got a number of those notes, and they were really nice. I will echo for my parting shot Donald's reminder that it is baseball season now. It is the annual way that I cope with Duke losing in the tournament, which of course happens more often than not, is that as soon as the game ends, I say, well, and now it's baseball season. And then I watch the Washington Nationals begin their annual slog towards winning the NL East and then losing in the first round of the playoffs in dramatic fashion. And at that moment, I always say, and now it's college basketball season. So here we are at the point of the year when I say, and now it is baseball season. Go Nats. And once again, I am your champion of the stats prediction game 2018. I just want everyone to really, appreciate that, let it sink in, because it means a lot to me, frankly, to beat such worthy competitors in Donald and Jason. But I did beat them fair and square this year. So don't forget, if you love the show, to subscribe to the Duke Basketball Report podcast on iTunes or on Google Play or Stitcher or SoundCloud, wherever you get your shows. Leave us a 5-star review, because we love those and because it helps other people find the show. If you have any complaints that do not involve 5-star reviews, you can feel free to email them to us at dbrpodcast@gmail.com. That's dbrpodcast@gmail.com. Like Jason said, we got a number of really nice notes this week that we really appreciated, and I think we responded to them all. So if we didn't, then we're jerks, and I'm sorry. Any comments that you want to send us are welcome there, or you can always comment on the threads that we post on the DBR forum. We always post a thread for each episode of the podcast, so you can comment there. And if you want to sponsor the show, like the fine gentlemen at Bird Campbell have been doing now for a few months, you can send us an email to that same email address, dbrpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll get you set up with a sponsorship. So for Donald Wine and for Jason Evans, I am Sam Klein. This has been episode 116 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. Duke Band, take us home.